Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to DIY Toys and Games from the Past and Present, a virtual family event with the Tenement Museum. My name is Julia. I'm an educator at the museum, and I'm really glad that you chose to spend this time with us today on YouTube. Joining us live online is my colleague, Melissa. Melissa will help facilitate your questions and observations in the chat. Melissa will also share with me some of the things that you all are asking and writing. So let's start off today by defining DIY. It's short for do it yourself. So any toy or game that we make or create ourselves with the materials we have around is DIY. Now, let's learn a little bit about the Tenement Museum. In just a second here. Bear with me 1 second. Okay, here we are. Sorry about that, friends. So, the Tenement Museum is a history museum located on Orchard Street in the Lower East Side of New York City, where we tell the stories of real life families who were newcomers to New York City and the United States by recreating the homes they lived in on Orchard Street. You are looking at the buildings that house these families. Today, we'll go inside them and see a home from 150 years ago, a home from 100 years ago, and learn about a workplace from 40 years ago to explore how kids played. Kids in the past made DIY toys for all sorts of reasons. They didn't have the same technology that we have now. They didn't have money to buy toys. Or maybe they just wanted to be creative. Well, whatever the reason, we're going to get inspired by them today. The first way we are going to learn about how kids played in the past is by doing a little bit of archaeology. Archaeology is the study of human history through the objects, or another word for object, artifacts that people left behind. When the Tenement Museum was starting about 30 years ago, no one had lived in the tenement building 97 Orchard for a long time. Archaeologists and historians went into the building and looked closely at the artifacts that people left behind. They also looked at some other buildings on Orchard Street that people had moved out of. These artifacts can tell us a lot about how people lived, what they ate, how they cooked, how they cleaned, and how they played. In fact, many of the artifacts that archaeologists and historians found were toys. Let's look at some of the ones we found. While I show you these toys, you can answer a question for us in the chat. How are these toys and games similar or different from toys and games now? Here, we have a wooden acrobat doll. It was found under the floorboards in the fourth floor hallway in the year 2008. See, the arms are made of string so you can flip it around like an acrobat. Those black and white squares each represent a centimeter. They are there to help us see how big the doll really is. This one is about 5 centimeters tall. Can you tell what this is? It was found in a basement of one of the buildings in Orchard Street. It's a submarine. And not just any submarine, this one winds up so the propeller can move on its own. Now, how about this one? It was found under the floorboards of a kitchen. Maybe you can tell from the cut in the wood on the top that it's a whistle. I'm sure that probably would have annoyed the neighbors. This one looks pretty fun to me. On the right side, you see a marble. This marble was actually made of clay instead of glass. Who knows, maybe someone made it in their home. The marble then could be rolled down the spiral to play the game Top the Marble. This one is a little newer than the others, but it was still found in one of the buildings on Orchard Street. These are tiles or pieces from a game called Mahjong. Mahjong developed in China and spread across the world. It's more popular for adults to play, but kids can learn too. So now I'm wondering if anyone has any thoughts. How are these toys similar or different from toys and games now? I see that Phoebe says that now games are nicer. Okay, that's an opinion to have. Maybe we'll think about um, games today that are like the past two that can also be nice. Any other thoughts? That the toys look smaller? Yeah, that's possible. A lot of times, especially if people made toys, they had to have the materials to make them. So if they were doing it themselves, they might have not have enough materials to make bigger toys. Any other thoughts? Some toys are the same, right? That we use motion for toys. Mhm. And we have spaceships today, right? So a lot of times toys resemble different technology or transportation modes, whether it's submarines or spaceships or trucks or things like that. And I'm hearing a really good point right now that a lot of games today are digital, right? That we might play video games or play on tablets or computers. That's because technology has developed, right? So I hope today that we can see some toys that don't require any technology that are still just as fun. And I'm hearing also that toys today make noise. Yeah, a lot of toys today do make noise. Some of the toys of the past could make a little bit of noise, but they didn't always run with electricity or with batteries. Games back then were handmade, a lot of them were. That's absolutely true. And that you had to use your imagination a lot more back then. Huh, I wonder why that is. I hope we all don't lose our sense of imaginations, but I bet you all have a good sense of imagination yourself too. So I'm going to start talking about one of the families that we're going to learn more from to learn how they played. Okay, so let's take a closer look at them. If you have any questions about these families, go ahead and put them in the chat. Melissa will either answer them or she'll send them to me a little bit later. Okay, this is a photograph of the living room or parlor of the Moore family. Bridget and Joseph Moore were immigrants from Ireland. In 1869, they lived in this apartment on the fourth floor with their children, Mary Kate, who's 5, Jane, who's 3, and Agnes, who was just a baby. Joseph worked in an Irish bar, and Bridget took care of the house, which was a lot of work. There was no electricity or running water, meaning there was no refrigerator or sink or toilet in the house. Bridget also would have made clothes for her daughters. With her sewing skills, she also might have made them a doll like this one. Bridget may have sewn dolls like this from rags or old clothes for her daughters to provide entertainment without having to spend extra money. Maybe Mary Kate and Jane can play with the doll while Bridget cooks using the coal stove or taking care of Agnes. Maybe Mary Kate would take it with her when she went out. We can imagine her holding it at the St. Patrick's Day parade of 1869, with a bundle of four-leaf clovers in the other hand. Bridget and Joseph would have wanted their children to connect with their Irish culture. Joseph might have played Irish songs on the fiddle while the children sang along and danced. They might have um, they might have found songs to sing and dance from a book like Moore's Irish Melodies on the right. And just like us who live in apartment buildings today, they probably would have had to be careful that they weren't too noisy. Now, I want to show you a DIY toy and game inspired by the Moore family. First, a doll. Just like Bridget used old fabric, these kids made dolls from materials they had lying around. You can be creative with anything you have. Some of the materials I see here are bottle caps, wooden spoons, a toilet paper roll, and even a paper towel. The doll made from toilet paper on the right even has her own nice, fluffy bed. Now for a game inspired by the Moors, dancing. We can play our own dancing game. You just need another person and a song you like to dance to. Basically, one person will start playing music and you start dancing. Then they will stop the music and shout something out that you have to freeze in the shape of. You can take turns. Let me show you. Hit it!
Lion. Swimming.
That was pretty fun. The shapes that you call out can be anything: animals, feelings, sports, plants, places, whatever works. All right, let's talk about another family now that lived on Orchard Street a little later than the Moores in 1916, the Confino family. This is a picture of the home of the Confino family as we imagined it looked in 1916. There were 10 people who lived there, the mom and dad, Rachel and Abraham, their children, Yosef, David, Saul, Victoria, Jacob, and Charlie, and their two cousins. The Confinos emigrated from a town called Castoria in what was then Turkey but is now Greece. Victoria was a Sephardic Jew, meaning that her family's ancestors were from Spain, and they spoke a language called Ladino. Victoria was 11 when she immigrated with her family. Victoria started school, but because English was new to her, she started in kindergarten with children much younger than her. Victoria made it to second grade before she stopped school at the age of 14 to help her family. This was the case for many children. The law then said that you only had to go to school till age 14. Unlike the Moors, the Confinos had running water and gas lighting. So when Victoria helped with the cooking, cleaning, and childcare, some things would be easier. However, Victoria also helped her father, who had an apron factory. Victoria would help sew the aprons. Victoria did still manage to find time to play and hang out with her friends, or what she would have called her crowd. In 1916, children in the Lower East Side played outside a lot. They didn't have a lot of room inside, so the streets, alleys, rear yards, and tenement rooftops were the best places to play. In this photograph, you see a group of boys playing a game called stickball. It's like baseball, but instead of a bat and ball, the kids used any old stick and made their own ball out of whatever they could find: yarn, fabric, rope. Another game kids played was I Spy the Wolf, or what we today call hide and seek. In this picture, we see kids playing with marbles on a rooftop. The homemade marbles on the right are just like the marbles that we found on Orchard Street by the archaeologists. As far as toys go, in 1916, people could get store-bought toys like battery-powered trains. So by 1916, you could get toys that probably moved by themselves and made sounds. Um, they could get wind-up toys, teddy bears, and balloons. But the Confino family probably could not afford them, to be honest. So, like many others, they would be creative and make toys like these. On the left, we see a little boy with a boxcar he can ride in. It's made from materials that he found. In the middle is a scooter made from wood and wheels that were found on the street. And on the right is a homemade checkerboard. Right? At 14, Victoria might have been a little old for some of these games. Here she is with her crowd. She's standing in the back row in the center. One thing Victoria loved was acting and theater. We don't know if she ever was in a play, but she definitely would have wanted to be. Victoria and her crowd might have gone to the Sephardic theater productions in her language, Ladino, like this picture. They might participate by cheering for the heroes and hissing at the villains. Or they might have gone to vaudeville. A vaudeville performance is made up of different acts that could include singers, dancers, comedians, acrobats, or magicians, like Harry Houdini. So let's talk about some DIY toys and games we can do now inspired by Victoria's time. Well, you could make your own checkerboard, just like Victoria might have, with just a paper and a marker. But let me tell you about another simple board game. Have you ever played dots and boxes? You can just draw a number of dots on a paper like this. You need two players, and each player needs a different colored marker. We'll use blue and red today. Okay, so each player takes a turn. The blue will go first. And connects two sets of dots. Then the red player goes and connects another two sets of dots. So you can only go vertically or horizontally. You can't go diagonally. The object of the game is to complete a square. And once you complete a square, you put your initial in the box. When all the dots are connected, the person with the most initials is the winner. A lot of us can't go outside and play right now because of the pandemic, but you can play a sport inside with your fingers. Finger soccers. All you need for this game is a piece of paper. So let me tell you how to play. First, fold the paper to neatly tear off a 2-inch strip from the top. Fold it again to tear off a 1-inch strip from the end. Fold triangles in and set it on a flat surface. That's your goal. Then rip out 3 small squares of paper and scrunch them into little balls. For playing the game, you can play by yourself or 2 players take turns. Player 1 releases the 3 balls at the other end of the surface on the other side of the goal. To move the balls forward, they have to flick the ball that's furthest back through the other 2. The goal is to get a goal, and then switch players. If you hit the other balls, miss getting through the balls, or flick any of the balls out of bounds past the goal or off the surface, then your turn is over. All right. Now, inspired by Victoria's love of acting, I want to tell you about another game called mirroring. It's very simple. You just need one other person to play with, and you stand and face each other. One person starts moving and making sounds, and the other person watches and tries to do the exact same thing at the exact same time, just like a mirror. Then you can switch. Okay, you can try with me, in fact. Ready? Anybody in there? Hello? All right, that was pretty fun. So now we have some more families to talk about. So we're going to go ahead in time. All right, so we're going to talk about the Wong family and the Yu family. The Wong family lived on Orchard Street until just a few years ago. Right now, you are looking at a picture of the recreation of the Wong children's 1970s bedroom on Orchard Street. Mr. and Mrs. Wong, with their two children, Yat Ping and Allison, immigrated from China in the 1960s. Unfortunately, in the United States, there were laws for a long time that didn't let many people from China immigrate here. The Wong family came as those laws were changing. Many other Chinese families came at the same time, and they built a community in the Lower East Side and Chinatown, which are right next to each other. On the right is a picture of Mrs. Wong with the youngest child, Kevin. And on the left is a picture of Kevin in front of the family TV. After Kevin was born in 1970, Mrs. Wong started to work in a factory that made clothes, or a garment factory. Many women who immigrated from China worked in these shops to make money to support their families. When Kevin was growing up, his grandparents helped take care of him while his parents were working. Kevin loved comic books, and his grandfather used to take him to the comic book store and patiently wait while Kevin read all the comics his heart desired. Sometimes Kevin would go to work with his mom too. He remembered that the garment factory was loud and dusty, but that other kids would be there too, and they would make toys and games out of the scraps and materials they found there. Another child of Chinese immigrant garment workers, Thomas Yu, also remembered making toys and games when he went to work with his mother. Let's actually watch a video of Thomas Yu discussing his memory.
A lot of children, well, we were all pretty poor, so a lot of us didn't really have toys like some of the other kids that may be a little better off. So we did find a lot of materials, like you could take clothes hangers that are like wire clothes hangers and bend them into certain animals. We would take string and we would do things where we pretend we were a spider, and we would go find a kind of a section of the factory that wasn't really used, and we would take the string and we'd tie it, and then we'll just drag it and like go to different poles and table legs and things until it was like a web. You just weave a web, and then as children we would see how strong it would be, and we would lie down on the web after we made the spider webs out of the string. And it'd be really fun until the boss came and was like, "What did you do with all my threads? You're wasting my threads." I remember my brother, he's very good with his hands and he's very crafty, and so he took a lot of the materials lying around in abundance in the factory. He would take the cardboard box that held a lot of the cloth or the threads, and he would take empty spools, and he decided, like, I can make a wagon out of this. And he would kind of start taking a scissor from my mom's sewing station and start putting the axles and the spokes in, and he would tie a harness to the wagon, and he was like, we're just missing almost like an animal to drag this thing. And of course, there were tons of factory cats running all around the factory. And he just had this idea, like, I'm just going to tether this to one of the cats, whether or not the cat liked that or not. And then so he found this orange tabby, I remember, and he would kind of corner it, this poor cat, and then somehow he managed to lasso this thing, and it was hooked to this wagon that was carrying all these other threads. And of course, the cat totally did not like this. It just bolted through the factory floor, dragging this wagon behind it with all the thread flying everywhere. And then, we had to kind of also find it later to take it off. So.
Oh, I feel bad for that cat, but that was a really creative idea. I don't recommend you do the same thing at home with your pet, but I was thinking of some ways to play inspired by Kevin and Thomas. Speaking of cats, Thomas talking about making a spider web out of string made me think of the game Cat's Cradle. For Cat's Cradle, you need some string or yarn and another person to play with. You can make lots of cool shapes with your fingers and pass the string back and forth. But I want to show you a string shape you can make all by yourself. It's called cat whiskers. So let's watch how to do it. Okay, so you'll start by holding the string between your pinky finger and thumb, like you see here. Then loop your index fingers through and pull one at a time. Drop the string from your thumbs. Cross your thumbs underneath and pull back the last string. Cross your thumbs over the closest string and pull back the next closest string. Drop the string from your pinky fingers. Cross your pinky finger over the closest string and pull back the next closest string, and then drop the string from your thumbs. You have cat whiskers. This is my cat Aki with her new whiskers. We also heard that Kevin loved comic books. You can always draw your own comic book strips. If you search online, there are actually a lot of websites that help you make comics. Another way you can draw in a fun way is by playing Exquisite Corpse. You need just 2 people, a paper, and drawing materials. You fold a piece of paper in 3 pieces, the top for the head, the middle for the body, and the bottom for the legs. The first person draws the head on the top part, then they fold it so the next person can't see it, and then they draw the body. They fold it again so you can only see the bottom half, and the next person draws the leg. Then you unfold it and see what sort of interesting creature you created. Here's one that we made at my house. Pretty weird, huh? Well, we are nearing the end of our program today, so this would be a great time if you had any questions that you could put in the chat box about any of the families or the Tenement Museum or anything we learned about today, and I'll do my best to answer them. Meanwhile, I'll tell you about next week's program. Getting Better, Health and Medicine in History. All of you living through the challenges and changes of COVID-19 pandemic, you might have lots of questions. How do we stay healthy? What should we do when we're sick? Has something like this ever happened before? In this program, we'll look to the past to see how tenement residents approach sickness and health throughout history. How did immigrant families combine healing methods from their cultures of origin with what they found in the United States? How did they respond to disease outbreaks like the 1918 flu pandemic? How did they help one another and find comfort during times of illness? So we hope to see you next week. And before I answer your questions, I also wanted to say that if you end up making any of these toys or doing any of these DIY games, you can post it on social media and you can tag at Tenement Museum so that we'll be able to see them. Okay, so let's see what I can answer here. So how did most people get the stuff to make the toys? Good question. Um, most people would probably just use things that they weren't using anymore. Like, for example, the Moore family, Bridget Moore probably would have made dresses, and she cut some scraps, or she cut some pieces that she didn't need. So she would use them to make a dress for her daughters, or a doll. I'm sorry, a doll for her daughters, right? Or maybe people would be selling things on the street, and they would use a wooden cart, okay? And then their wooden cart didn't work anymore. So someone could go and say, hey, can I use that piece of wood that you're not using anymore? And then you have a nice piece of wood to build any sort of toy that you want. So not so dissimilar from today. If we're making toys on our own, we might use things like toilet paper rolls or buttons or string, some stuff that you would buy, but other stuff that you would just find lying around your house. And it says, did anyone try to sell the toys that they made? Great question. That would be a very enterprising thing to do. They might have, or they might have traded with each other, something that we could do today, trade toys. But I bet a lot of kids would have wanted to buy some of the cool toys that everyone was making from their friends. And someone asked if I know why that game is named Exquisite Corpse. Well, my guess is, corpse is like a body. And so you're building a very strange looking body together, right? Like the one that I showed you. So I think that that is all of the questions that I see coming in. So I think that we will wrap up our program today. So thank you all so much for tuning in and for participating. And I really hope that you get inspired and play a bunch of these games or make some of these toys. I had a really good time doing them with you today. So let me just share one last thing with you. All right, so if you'd like to learn about all of our events at the Tenement Museum, you can go to tenement.org/events, and then you can also follow at Tenement Museum. And remember to tag anything you post that you learned about today with at Tenement Museum. So I hope you all have a great week, a great evening. Hope to see you again soon, and goodbye for now.